And earlier today, I spoke with retired Marine General Frank McKenzie, who most recently served as the commander for the United States Central Command. Here's part of our conversation. Let's start with your reaction to what we've seen today.
So, Caitlin, I always thought the Iranians could respond in one of three ways. They could launch a calibrated response, they could launch a massive response, or they could choose not to respond. Early reports indicates they've chosen to launch a calibrated response, which means a limited number of missiles against a limited number of targets. They had the option perhaps to fire a lot more missiles at a lot more targets. At least up until now, they have chosen not to exercise that. This tells me the Iranians are looking to not further escalate the situation. I could be completely wrong on this, but that's the way it looks right now.
So does this seem to you to be more of a symbolic response? In other words, that they had to do something?
Yes, it is. And I think it's an attempt to show that, that you're not going to bomb Iranian soil without being responded to. And they're trying to do it in a way that won't invite a massive U.S. response. That's a difficult needle to thread. I think they're trying to do that right now.
To that point, what would it take in terms of a retaliatory response that would prompt the U.S. to respond again?
Caitlin, it's difficult to know, but I would assess that probably loss of life or serious injury to American soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines.
That would be the red line,
that would be my estimate, but again, I don't know that.
And another question along those lines is, what about attacks on allies, severe attacks? Would that prompt U.S. response?
I think that would be on a case-by-case basis, who the ally is, what was the nature of the attack. I think all those things would be looked at given the particulars of that situation.
What would you say is the direct level of threat to U.S. troops in the region right now?
I think it's high. And I think CENTCOM knows that. Central Command is doing a lot of things to make it safer for our troops. We can maneuver troops around. We can move them off the obvious target areas. We can reposition assets. We're very good at doing this. We know how the Iranians look at our bases, and we can adjust as a result of that. So CENTCOM is very busy right now trying to adopt the very highest force protection posture that we can, given the nature of the threat.
And is this something that, the U.S. would obviously have been prepared for, knowing that this could happen?
Every CENTCOM commander knows that after you conduct a strike on Iran, their response is what you need to be ready for. I worried about that more than any other single thing as I looked at these kinds of operations. I'm sure General Kurilla is going through the same thought process right now, because what you want to do is, so we've hit Iran, we've accomplished our objectives. The Iranians are in the process of responding to us right now. We want to prevent loss of American life so that we can avoid further escalation. And what we want to do is give the maximum options to the U.S. president so that he does not feel a need to respond. He can be very flexible in his response to an attack like this. I will share this with you. President Trump was very statesmanlike and very smart in his response to the Iranian attack at al-Assad in January 2020. As you know, that followed the successful strike on Qasem Soleimani. The Iranians responded with a dozen or a little few more missiles against our airbase at al-Assad. No Americans were killed in that strike. No significant damage was done because we were able to reposition. Now, it turns out in the days followed, we had people that had significant concussion effects, didn't know that at the time, and it was a new injury because we had never been fired at by warheads with those warheads of that size before. But no one was killed, and President Trump chose not to respond to that, which I thought was enlightened statesmanship at the time. I thought it was the right move then. So he has that history, and I'm sure he'll rely on that kind of thinking as he considers what to do now. But it all comes down to what's the level of damage that the Iranians incur on us, and what's the loss of life.
If we could kind of just take a step back and look at what we're essentially looking at right now, which is the U.S. made these strikes over the weekend, Iran is responding. If you are the average American sitting at home wondering what the scope of all of this is, how would you characterize this moment that we're in? Are we at war?
So I think we have stated as a basic element of U.S. policy, we're not going to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. This is an action to attain that end. So I don't believe we're at war with Iran. That could change based on what Iran does or doesn't do. But I think it is not our intent to go to war with Iran. I don't think this president wants to go to war with Iran. He's certainly prepared to do that. But again, that will be driven by the Iranian response that, as we just discussed, is underway right now.
And the president and administration officials have been adamant that they are hoping that this leads to a diplomatic solution. To echo what you were saying, that they don't want this to escalate further. Do you think what we've seen today opens the door for some kind of negotiation to be had?
Well, it's certainly more open than if Iran had launched 1,000 missiles. So it certainly tells you, I would argue that Iran is signaling that they want to go forward. They probably want to have some level of diplomatic contact. The problem with the Iranians, though, is, in the words of a former CENTCOM commander, they've never met a war they could win or a negotiation they could lose. So Iranians want to negotiate often for the sake of negotiations, which we don't. We need to be careful that if we go into negotiations with Iran.
And more from the general straight ahead.